Hello, my friends, and welcome back to our weekly Torah study. Our Torah reading this Shabbat contains two Sedras, MATTOT and MASAY, beginning with Numbers chapter 30, verse 2 and following. And along with these texts, two very important things will be occurring. First of all, since MASAY is the last Sedra in the fourth book of the Torah, Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, this Shabbat, all across the world, we will be hosting, celebrating, participating in a SIYYUM to celebrate the closing of the book of Bamidbar. And we're going to have great food. We're going to have authentic Jewish food, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, along with some very challenging drink as well. And we will call out, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, let us be strong, let us be strong, let us strengthen one another. And we will begin to prepare for the reading of the book of Deuteronomy next week. Secondly, to our great relief, I am pleased to announce that beginning next week, the assigned weekly Torah readings in Israel will be fully aligned with the assigned Torah readings in the rest of the world. And I say, yay! We've been out of sync since, how long? Since Shavuot, correct. But now the Jewish people across the world will be able to agree upon at least one thing of significance, what the Torah reading is on a given Shabbat. And that unity will be even more important for us to embrace as we approach Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, Saturday evening, August 10th. At its core, Tisha B'Av certainly reminds us about the kinds of disasters that befall the Jewish people when we abandon unity as a core foundational value. So, okay, before we party, let's study. Our combined Sedras mark the beginning of the end of the 40 years wandering in the desert. The entire book of Deuteronomy, that which starts next week, focuses upon the last days of Moses' life, his final speeches to the people before he dies. They go off to enter the land. We also find here a listing of the 42 places the Israelites camped at during the years of wandering, beginning with a place called Ramses, ending with the plains of Moab. This listing actually is really pretty much feels out of place in this location. There's an additional problem. A number of the places that are mentioned as camping places have no other reference in the whole Torah. So we don't know what happened there. We don't know what these places signify. But okay, so we're going to leave it to scholars to figure it out. And sooner or later, they'll let us know. The daughters of Zelophechad also find their story told this week in our Torah readings. And that story is justifiably celebrated as a signpost toward the future as we probe for opportunities to ground our commitment to full and equal rights of women within our sacred text. These opportunities, to be frank, are painfully few and far between. So the daughter's struggle for the right to inherit property is justifiably famous. Good story. It's quite instructive to remember, unfortunately, that also to be found in this week's readings is a passage that gives various men the right to annul vows made by women. By denying women full agency in controlling their own lives in this Sedra, the Torah seems to be giving with one hand and taking back with the other. And maybe in a nutshell, that clearly lays out the tasks for those of us committed to the pursuit of Torah's noblest values, even when those values can be and too often are obscured by ethical and moral standards in the Torah that no longer are compatible with our own. In the last days of Moses' life, this is the big story here. The leaders of the tribes of Reuven and Gad come to him with a deeply troubling request. They don't want to go to Canaan. They've looked around the final encampment of the Israelites. They like what they see here. They're cattle farmers. And there is plenty of grazing room right where they are. Can you just imagine how the 120-year-old Moses responded to this request? He was appalled. You don't want to enter the land? The land promised to us by God. We have been on this journey for 40 years, and now, at the end of the journey, you're opting out? And for why? For what reason? Because there's good pasture here? Because it looks like a nice place to settle down and raise your kids? What? You like the views? Everyone else is girding up for battle. The promised land will not be handed to us on a silver platter. Your fellow Israelites face bloody challenges ahead, and you think that it might be a nice thing to settle here and let everyone else do what has to be done without you? You're no better than your parents before you, who so quickly accepted the warnings and the fears and the reports of the 10 spies that we were not strong enough to conquer the land. You are abandoning your family, your people, when they need you the most. So ended Moses. The families of Reuben and Gad were taken aback by the ferocity of Moses' anger. They immediately backtracked. Okay. We get what you're saying. So let's try this. We'll leave our herds and our children here, and we will be the chalutzim. The word means shock troops. We'll be the shock troops. We will lead the Israelite tribes into whatever lies ahead. And only when each of the other tribes has been successfully settled in its own allotted territory will we return to this really nice place and settle here. Nachnu navor chalutzim. We will be the shock troops. Moses calmed down. Didn't want to worry about his heart. Big deal. And the matter was resolved. Rabbi Shai Held, my new and current favorite commentator, thinks that Moses knew all about what he called the contagion of fear. The Reubenites and Gadites will be seen by the others fairly or unfairly as not trusting in God's promises and not trusting in the capacity of the Israelites to achieve what they were determined to achieve. Fear is a virus. It spreads quickly. It consumes the spines of those exposed to it. It drains their resolve. And at the end of the day, fear, by the way, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Fear achieves precisely what it seeks to avoid. When the 10 spies said they felt like grasshoppers as compared to the inhabitants of Canaan, that metaphor melted the people's resolve. Now, if these two tribes opted out, they could very well condemn the entire enterprise to failure and more. Well, what if the two tribes actually weren't afraid, but they were more interested in preserving their wealth than in working on behalf of all of the others? The Midrash tells us that privileging wealth and comfort over moral imperatives is as crippling as fear. Materialism can easily blind us to the needs of others. Materialism can easily become spiritual poison. Materialism can cause us to see others as pawns to be moved about the board for our own benefit. When we back away from acting out of our fear, we corrupt the entire undertaking. We act out of our fear, we corrupt. When we back away from acting out of self-interest, out of a desire to preserve materialism, a materialism that is dulling our moral sensibilities, again, we corrupt the entire undertaking. But, my friends, that was then, and now is now. Our texts would ask us, are we among those who, out of fear or out of self-interest, leave the heavy lifting in our world to others? Do we realize that when we hold back from doing what we really know to be right, we are actually condemning the efforts of others to failure. The good news by the end of the book of Numbers is that Reuben and Gad actually got it before their actions poisoned our national dream. Maybe there is something for us to learn here. So have a wonderful Shabbat. Celebrate your SIYYUM. Chazak, chazak. But also, let's just take a minute to think about the impact of what we sometimes choose not to do will have upon others. Then, while you're thinking about that, please hit share. Shabbat Shalom.